Wes here from Findaway Voices, and in this video I will demonstrate how to adjust your audio files to meet our required audio specifications. I am the head mastering engineer of the audio team, where we review the files of each submitted audiobook to ensure that it will meet the specifications of our long list of distribution partners. This video is for individuals who might be having a difficult time meeting these requirements, or this video can be used to verify once audio files will pass our specifications. I must say that this is not the only way to adjust your audio files. There are other methods that involve high-end professional audio equipment and software and plugins. The methods that I will cover today are simple adjustments that can be made in an at-home, small studio, digital audio workstation environment. Our software of choice is Adobe Audition. It is a very affordable DAW to record, edit, and master audiobook productions. It is equipped with pre-installed tools that help you pinpoint exactly where your RMS values are and other audio statistics of your files, so you're in the know and you know exactly where those values are, and you don't have to wonder or guess where those values could be. Our audio requirements break down into two different sections. The first section would be audio file structure and format. So this covers the order of the files and how things need to be structured in order to meet the specifications. And the second section would be the technical audio requirements. So that would involve the audio statistics and the values, loudness values, different durations of head time and tail time, things we'll get into in a moment. So we'll start off here with chapters, credits, and any introductions must be standalone files. So this means you can't have a combination of two chapters contained in one audio file, or a section and a chapter contained in one audio file. Each individual audio file has to contain an individual chapter. Here's an example of what not to do and how you can fail this requirement by having two sections combined in one audio file.
To Dad from Kelly, by Kelly Lytle. Read by Kelly Lytle. For Mom and Aaron.
Hold on.
Life is like a box of chocolates. Every day is a big bite. Rob Lytle. Read by Kelly Lytle. For Mom and Aaron. Life is like a box of chocolates.
Combined in one audio file.
To Dad from Kelly, by Kelly Lytle. Read by Kelly Lytle. For Mom and Aaron. Life is like a box of chocolates. Every day is a big bite. Rob Lytle.
So after listening to the opening credits, we heard a dedication at the end of the opening credits, and sometimes
Book name by you, read by you. Dedication is the 4. I thought originally that was a subtitle. Let's keep going.
There's a dedication. Many times there's an introduction to the audiobook. These would be examples of the combination of two sections contained in one audio file. In order to adjust this audio file to meet the specifications, we would have to separate the two sections and save them as standalone audio files. The next requirement would be files must be no longer than 120 minutes each.
It's 2 minutes.
To determine this, you want to swing over to the duration of all of your audio files and ensure that none of these files are over 120 minutes long. If you do discover that there's an audio file that is longer than 120 minutes, that audio file must be broken down into sections, and those individual sections must be saved as standalone files as well. Now, when you upload those individual sections back to the Voices site, they must be named Part 2 of the original file, and they must have the same required specifications as the other individual files. The next requirement would be proper order and should start with a verbal indication. So this means that each audio file should begin with a chapter heading or a section heading.
Acknowledgements. The final letter. Dear Dad. More. Dad's
So you want to make sure that each file has a proper chapter heading. If you do not have a chapter heading, that will cause your audio files to face delay when it comes to some of our distribution partners. They're pretty strict on having headings to each chapter. And for some audio files that are a author's note, you might get away with not having a chapter heading for an author's note. But for chapters and sections, the best bet would be to have a proper heading in front of each of those audio files. The next requirement is that the opening credits must contain the title and author and narrator names. So this is a big one. This will cause any audiobook that we submit off to some of our most popular partners to be rejected.
To Dad, from Kelly. By Kelly Lytle. Read by Kelly Lytle.
It is very important that the title, the author, and the narrator be identified inside of the opening credits, and any additional information outside of the title, the author, and the narrator might also be considered a combination of two different sections. So if you have a title, an author, and a narrator, then you also wanted to give a brief description of the audiobook, that will be labeled as having a combined section with your opening credits, and you will want to separate those two into individual audio files. So for the opening credits, you only want to include the title of the book, the author's name, and the narrator's name. And if you want to provide copyright information, that will be acceptable as well. Moving on to our next requirement, the closing credits must reference the completion of the book. So this means that the closing credits should reference the completion of the book. It should state the end. It should, in some way, shape, or form, let the listener know that the audiobook has come to an end. It can simply be the narrator saying the end. It can also be the opening credits played again just to stamp the book as a complete production.
To Dad, from Kelly. By Kelly Lytle. Read by Kelly Lytle.
Any more information than bringing the book to an end would be considered combining a section with the audio file. So if you wanted to give more information about the book, or if you wanted to give information about the author and about the author audio file, would be best to separate that combined section with your opening credits, and you will want to separate those two into individual audio files. So for the opening credits, you only want to include the title of the book, the author's name, and the narrator's name. And if you want to provide copyright information, that will be acceptable as well. Moving on to our next requirement, the closing credits must reference the completion of the book. So this means that the closing credits should reference the completion of the book. It should state the end. It should, in some way, shape, or form, let the listener know that the audiobook has come to an end. It can simply be the narrator saying the end. It can also be the opening credits played again just to stamp the book as a complete production.
To Dad, from Kelly. By Kelly Lytle. Read by Kelly Lytle.
Any more information than bringing the book to an end would be considered combining a section with the audio file. So if you wanted to give more information about the book, or if you wanted to give information about the author and about the author audio file, would be best to separate that audio file and keep that into the back matter section of the audio book, and leave the closing credits simply as the end of the book. That wraps up our audio file structure and format. We move on to our technical audio requirements, and the first one is that all audio files must be human narrated.
Okay. Title, author, narrator. name, which is name of book, by, read by, basically. All right, that's section 1. Section 2, if you would like, copyright information. Each section is labeled differently. Now, what I did not understand is, should the section be mentioned when you do 3 going until the end of the book? And then I understood the closing to be either the end or the same beginning from when you first started the book in regards to credits. So that's a question mark. Let's keep going.
And provide it as FLAC or MP3 files. To ensure that your audio files are in the right format, swing over to the source format of the audio files and verify that each audio file is an MP3 or a FLAC file. If you do have FLAC files, we will prefer you to upload those files as opposed to MP3 files because FLAC is a higher quality format than an MP3 format. Our next requirement is that each audio file must have an RMS value between -23 decibels and 18 decibels with a peak below -3 decibels. Meeting this requirement can be very difficult for a lot of different engineers and audiobook producers, and it's a matter of using the right software to generate and accurately pinpoint these values. And once you get that nailed, you're pretty much in a good space. But it is the combination of knowing what to look for as well as having the software to calculate the values of the RMS. And here in Adobe Audition, this is what we use to calculate these values. They give us a clean read of each value, and we're solely seeking the total RMS value here to ensure that each file has the -23 through -18 decibels, and then we'll address the peaks after we address the total RMS. So total RMS is a value that you want to address first in many different systems, and this can get very complicated very quick, but to break it down in its simplest form, there are different ways to achieve this requirement, and I'll start with the simplest way, and the simplest way is via Adobe Audition, because there are a few buttons to push and the values are accurate. So as you can see, these audio files do not meet the specifications for total RMS or for peak values, and in Adobe Audition there's a ITURBS algorithm here, which lets you set the target loudness to whatever you would like to set it to. I usually go -20.5 decibels, and we're gonna set this peak, we're gonna keep it here at -3.5. And again, hats off to the software. This is all Adobe Audition doing most of the work for us. Once you run this process, the software generates these values for you. So as you can see, the total RMS for all of the files are hovering around -21.3 decibels, and the peaks are all set to -3.5, well below the -3 decibel threshold to meet this requirement. That is the easiest way to meet this requirement. Another way to meet this requirement would be to, in Adobe Audition as well, hop over to the total RMS feature and set the total RMS to -20.5. And you'll see after you run this process that the peak values will adjust as well. So as you can see, the total RMS of all files is now -20.5, but that has also adjusted the peak values of all the audio files, which are now above the -3 decibel requirement. And unfortunately, this will cause an audiobook to be rejected from some of our partners. And many engineers simply see the total RMS being within the range here and the peak RMS being outside of the range, and they would hop over to the peak settings and adjust the peak settings back into the proper requirement, and after you run this process, so as you can see, we have a negative 3.5 peak value for all audio files. And now that we've made that adjustment, the total RMS for a file is negative 23, which is outside of the range. This is enough to drive someone crazy. Many times we get questions about changing the total RMS, which also changes the peak and back and forth. And in this situation, we would advise to do these steps in this exact order. Keep the total RMS of all files at negative 20.5. Negative 20.5. All of the files will now and back and forth, and in this situation we would advise to do these steps in this exact order. Keep the total RMS of all files at negative 20.5. Negative 20.5. All of the files will now read negative 20.5 decibels for the total RMS. To get this peak under the threshold of negative 3 decibels, we'll go into the effects drop down and we'll click on hard limiter. So this unfortunately does take away some of the headroom of your audio file, which is a small trade-off for many different reasons. This is only in cases in which the other processes didn't work and there was no way to adjust the total RMS and the peak and have both values within the right range. So inside of the hard limiter, you'll see that you can set the hard limiter to negative 3.5 decibels. This will simply chop off every single peak that goes past that threshold, and after you apply this process, you'll hop back over to the window here. You see now this file reads negative 3.5 decibels, well within the range to pass this requirement. Follow the same process for the remaining files that are not within the range, and you should be good to go to meet this requirement. So the next requirement on the list is a maximum noise floor of negative 60 decibels. The noise floor is the audio that is present when the narrator is not speaking. So to determine this value, we will simply highlight an area where the narrator is not narrating and loop this area so we can see exactly where it comes up down on the VU meter at the bottom. So once you analyze the VU meter when the narrator is not speaking and you don't see the volume going up past negative 60 decibels, you're good to meet this requirement. If the if the noise floor is above negative 60, this can be a tough one to adjust. And in this situation, you really want to make sure that you take the right steps in pre-production in your recording setup and the recording environment to address all noise floor issues. So at this stage, we're kind of in the mastering part of the production process, and the noise floor is something that should be addressed in pre-production. So this involves the recording environment and the equipment that you record with, as well as the tracking engineer that records the production. Our next requirement is that the format of the audio files must be at 192 kilobits per second or higher for the bit rate. The sample rate must be at 44.1 kilohertz, and all files must be either mono or stereo files, and it can't be a combination of both. All audio files submitted to the Find a Way Voices site must either be in MP3 or FLAC format. For the MP3s, the following sample rate and bit rate must be accounted for. So as you can see, we'll swing over to the source format of the audio files in Adobe Audition, and we'll clearly see that the sample rate is at 44.1, the bit rate is at 192 kilobits per second, and all files are in mono files. So we won't have any problems meeting the specification with these files here. If you did discover that your files were in the improper format, you can always adjust those settings once you export the audio files out of your DAW. The next requirement is head duration must be between 0.5 and 1 second of silence, which is room tone. So this means once you scroll to the front of each audio file, I'll bring it into the multi-track window to give you a better visual. Here we are. Okay, so here are all of our audio files, and the narration of the audio should begin within 0.5 seconds to 1 second of the beginning of the audio file. So this entire area here would be considered the head of the audio file. So if you see that there's a head of the audio file that is longer than 0.5 to 1 second, this would be a reason in which one of our partners would reject the audio files due to having an extended head duration. So to address this, simply just trim back the head time to be within the range. Continue to do so for the preceding files.
Epidemic Sound provides you with restriction-free music and sound effects that you can use across all of your content without having to worry about it getting taken down or muted. It's designed for creators so that you can save time and really find the songs that you're looking for really quickly and efficiently. It doesn't really matter if you're a video creator or if you create videos for clients, you can actually just pick whichever license works for you. This resource is
I've used Epidemic Sound. I am not a big fan. Let's keep it moving. No, I don't want to learn more. I want to skip this ad.
Continue to do so for the preceding files. So now that that adjustment has been made to all of the audio files, we can visually see that every audio file has a head duration that is within the 0.5 to 1 second range. So we are all set to meet the requirement of head duration being between 0.5 to 1 second for all files. The next requirement is tail duration must be between 1 and 5 seconds at the end of an audio file. So this means the end of the audio file, we apply the same principle as we did for the head, but now we need to ensure that each file has 1 second to 5 seconds. So here we can see that the end of this audio file has 5.2 seconds, and we can determine how long this tail is because once we've highlighted the end of the audio file, we can use the selection view window to see exactly how long that duration of highlighted audio is, and this would result and a rejection from our partners, so we simply trim this back to 4 seconds to meet the requirement, and we follow the same practice for the remainder of the other audio files. So after the tail duration has been adjusted for all audio files and we're good to go as far as the tail duration being between 1 second and 5 seconds for all audio files, we move on to our last requirement, which is no copyright material or extraneous sounds, which can be a combination of any type of background noise interfering with the audio files. This is something that we really can't gauge. There's honestly not a lot of things.
Air conditioning, turning of pages, sirens, outside noises like birds, people yelling in the background.
Things that you can do in post-production to address these issues. Our best advice would be to address outside noises during the pre-production stage, and there's really it kind of ties our hands once we're at the final mastering phase and the essentially the delivery of your audio files to a partner, that those things come about. With all of the requirements met that we've covered in the past few minutes, this concludes the breakdown of our audio requirements. I hope this can be used as a reference to anyone who might need just a small bit of greater detail and clarity and last requirement, which is no copyright material or extraneous sounds, which can be a combination of any type of background noise.
What do you mean by no copyrighted material? It's a book. All the material should be copyrighted. Okay.
Interfering with the audio
I'm gonna look through the
files.
comments real quick.
This is something that we really can't gauge. There's honestly not a lot of things that you can do in post-production to address these issues. Our best advice would be to address outside noises during the pre-production stage, and there's really
Maybe there's some answer
once we're at the final
comments.
mastering phase and the essentially the delivery of your audio files to a partner.
I got two
that
questions.
Those things come about. With all of the requirements met that we've covered in the past few minutes, this concludes the breakdown of our audio requirements. I hope this can be used as a reference to anyone who might need just a small bit of greater detail and clarity in why these specifications are what they are and how to adjust your audio files to meet them. If you do have more questions, you can always reach out to us at support@findawayvoices.com.
Head duration, according to ACX standards, should be no more than 5 seconds. He stated 1 second. Let's put 5 seconds. So just like the end, it should be 5 seconds. I would like to see a reading, an actual live reading. From beginning to end. ACX live narration from beginning to end.
Record and edit, which is called punch and roll, which is basically this. Instead of hitting a clicker when you make a mistake, you actually stop the recording to take a breath, right? And I always say,
I just need a 3 to 5 minute recording.
Audible is the best place to listen for everyone. For story.
I'm going to show you step by step and in a super easy way how to take your audio from sounding something like this to something a little more professional that sounds like this. So what are we going to learn in this lesson? We're going to look at equipment needs. We're going to go over an ACX overview, although it will be very brief. We're going to go over recording and editing, exporting your final product, final submission, and then we're going to do a wrap-up and review. Let's expand this out a little bit.
How long is this?
So, equipment needs, I'm going to show you a real simple setup that you'll need.
Alright, I'm going to go listen to this. I'm going to need some more insight and some, and since this is an hour or something, he must have been doing this a minute.